So, we're going to talk about life lessons today and how they often present themselves through cycles. Many times, the lessons we are meant to learn over the trajectory, over the course of our life, present themselves first as a cycle. And so, what do I mean by that? You can look in your teenage years and you can see that behavior or something similar happening in your teenage years, happening again in your young adult 20s, and then even in your 30s, and sometimes in your 40s if that cycle has not been broken. But how many of you know this morning that God is a cycle breaker? And so here's what I want you to understand when you see cycles in your life. Instead of getting upset about them, begin to ask, what is the lesson for me? Because many life lessons often present themselves as cycle. Because there's some lessons I believe that are just been decided that you need to learn for your soul's progression and evolution, that you need to learn in this lifetime. And so until you learn it, I don't care if you move to Atlanta, I don't care if you move to Australia, I don't care if you move to Europe, that cycle is going to follow you because that cycle is associated with your soul's evolution. I don't care. Sometimes you can see people in different relationships with different people, but they see the same cycle happen over and over. Sometimes they choose a different gender. The same cycle presents themselves because there's a lesson for them to learn. But here's the thing about a life lesson. Here's the thing about a life lesson. Once you learn it, and not just once you learn it, once you embody the lesson, once that lesson has taken root in you and that cycle no longer continues, your life is automatically upgraded at a high level. It's almost like you do a quantum leap because the whole trajectory of your life has changed. The whole energetic landscape of your life has changed when those cycles are put to bed. And so here is what I heard God, and this is the nugget that I want to lean into this morning. Here's what God said to me a couple of weeks ago very clearly, and I had to go Google that exact phrase to make sure I didn't hear this anywhere else. The Spirit said to me that cycles follow frequency. Lean in. I want you to catch what I'm saying. Cycles follow frequency. So what that means is the cycle follows and continues to show up because you are still in an energetic state where that cycle is conducive for growth, right? So basically you're resonating. You may say, no, I'm not resonating with that in any way, but in some form of consciousness, you are resonating with the cycle. Some form of you, some part of you is resonating with a cycle that continuously shows up in your life. And so God said, here's what they need to know. So you've got the principle God wants you to understand, that cycles follow frequency. And so God said, often what happens with many of us is that we fight the byproduct of the level of consciousness that's producing the cycle. That we fight the byproduct of the level of consciousness that produced the cycle. And so what do I mean by that? We're fighting the material thing that is produced by that level of consciousness or that energetic state. We're trying to fight behaviors. We're trying to fight circumstances. And God is saying that we have to stop focusing on the material and go towards the immaterial. Stop focusing on the seen and go towards the unseen and addressing what caused that level of consciousness. And so God said that breaking cycles is not about fighting. Breaking cycles is not about fighting. When we think about some of the principles I've been sharing around the difference in the energy that it requires to fight something versus build something, that's a totally different energy, right? We've talked about that. Building our life and not fighting and spending our life resisting and pushing against force, pushing against something, right? And so God said, instead of fighting the material and the byproduct of the consciousness that produced it, raise your consciousness, right? And that can be hard because if you're operating in the level of consciousness that is resonating with a cycle or producing a cycle, it can be hard for you to raise your level of consciousness. But here's what you need to know. That is why God sends us spiritual teachers. That's why God allows for us to meditate. There are different ways to raise your frequency. And so sometimes you simply got to go higher Forget about just, I got to learn the lesson. Number one, God is saying you need to go higher. So that means sometime if God has planted you in a spiritual setting, I don't care how much you feel like, oh, this doesn't resonate with me, I don't want to be here, all these logical things rolling around in your mind. God is saying, immerse yourself into things and places that bring you higher. Some of us want to go back to these